We're glad to know you're still there. It's still the breakfast on Plus TV Africa. Now, the Nigerian Correctional Services, NCOS, has refuted reports claiming that 26,000 children are held in custodial centers across the country. In a statement by its national spokesman, Abubakar Umar, the NCOS labeled the report as misleading and a gross misrepresentation of facts. The service emphasized that in line with national and international legal standards, it does not admit individuals under age of 18 into adult custodial centers. Referring to the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 and the Child Rights Act of 2003, the NCOS stated that minors in conflict with the law are handled through a separate juvenile justice system. This typically involves juvenile detention facilities like bus-style training institutions or state-owned remand centers. The service also highlighted its rigorous procedures for verifying the age and identity of inmates upon admission, collaborating with agencies such as the police, judiciary, and social welfare departments to ensure appropriate classification and protection of minors. The NCOS expressed concern over the potential damage such reports could inflict on its image and Nigeria's human rights record. It reiterated its commitment to upholding human rights and protecting vulnerable groups, including children. The service urged the public and media to verify sensitive information through official channels before dissemination to avoid misinformation and unwarranted public concern. Our guest this morning is Jacob Choji Pwakim, Executive Director, Youth Initiative Against Violence and Human Rights Abuse, Yiavha. Good morning and welcome to the program, Jacob.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I read all the big grammar from NCOS, but you being part of Youth Initiative Against Violence and Human Rights Abuse, you may have your personal experience about this. They are denying that they don't have youths in custody. But what is your experience like with these correctional centers?
Okay, so interesting that I've had a personal touch with them because my dad too had worked with the prisons and now the correctional service. Now, whatever that is happening at the correctional center, which is supposed to be correctional, is a typical reflection of what happens in the larger society, the criminal justice system. And once one part of it is faulty, it affects the other. Just so unfortunate that we have a problem of documentation or data in the country, where if they say we should go to, to verified mediums, platforms, where do we get this data? And how honest is this data? Do they make entries of this data based on international best practice or standards, or based on what truly they are doing? So, at the correctional center is one part of the conversation that is so much held in secrecy, that they are not too open to their affairs may not be so open as it should be. So while we have a problem we may have a problem with the correctional center because we may not be too sure of what exactly is happening there. This is an information provided like more or less like a whistleblower. So for us is how do we, people who do, organizations who do work around the justice, the prison reforms, should now begin to do these investigations. So for me, I think I've had more of interaction with the police than with the prisons. Now, when we now look at what is happening with the police, we're likely going to understand more critically what likely is to happen with the prisons. When these children from the north were being detained over the end bad governance protests, first of all, how many days were they detained? Is it in line with the Child Rights Act 2003? Or they have their own international best practice somewhere? They were not supposed to be detained beyond at most 24 hours. Their own regulation is even more specific than that of the adult. They were detained beyond those periods of time. And where were they kept? So within looking at what has happened what happened recently, this is a very clear case that is within the public leg. It clearly shows that there are so many issues. And now when we talk about even the issue of detention of children or not, taking them to booster homes, how many of those facilities are actually available? I know in Plateau, for instance, we have one facility. How large is that facility? What is a structural formation that has the capacity to also to not just detain a child, but to also transform or reform that child? So it's a systemic problem that the author of that document decided to just look at one arm of it. It's a reflection of what happens within the criminal justice system and how children are being treated. And in my own opinion, it reflects on why we are having the kind of problems we're having. And that is why when we talk about the issue of radicalism, violent extremism, terrorism, all those places, detention facilities are breeding grounds for all kind of negative transformation that happen to children. So it is not just a Nigerian prisons issue, it's the whole of society problem, because when children are being detained, what is the certainty that when they get out of, whether it is a prison, some of us we call the correctional facilities, or even it is police detention camp, cells, and ordinarily they are not even supposed to be put in cells by whatever standard. How best do they come out of it? Are they better people? So it is a review. It calls for a review of the justice system on one part, the criminal justice system on one part, and a review of also the application of the Child Rights Act. And in a couple of states, they now have the Child Rights Law. How has it been applicable, and are our societies, our children better off whenever they are in conflict with the law?
Yeah, well, I thought they were going to say, oh, we don't have this much people, we have just less number and all that. And they said that they don't have at all people who are under 18 years. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will only know about postal training centers in this report, because you can't find them anywhere, any place that you see that is labeled a postal training center. Because in the experiences that a lot of people, in fact in Nigeria, if you don't go to the cell, it's not something to be proud of. It means that maybe you have not spoken out before, because a lot of people have been in the cell for no reason at all, including some of us who are today talking about these things. And the experience in the cells and in the prisons, because as a president, even there was a time we had some kind of, that's not advocacy, some kind of evangelism that we were doing in the prisons, and we saw these things. Some of these children are not even convicts, they are awaiting trial, and they've been there for years without, in fact, Nigeria's correctional services are still prisons, just prisons. So if you call it like that, I will not be angry with you, because there is nothing correctional about it. But you are an executive director in Youth Initiative Against Violence and Human Rights Abuse. Where do you think we will start from to correct this? Because obviously they are lying. If you go to the prisons right now, you'll find underage people, or people who have become 18 years after they have spent so many years in prison. So that is not just something that we are assuming. But what are we going to do to make sure these things will stop?
Okay, to be very honest, this problem that we're talking of, like I've said, is a problem of the criminal justice system. The criminal justice procedure is so transparent. It is already manipulated that you could hear somebody will tell you that I would lock you and throw the key to the deep sea. So it is a reflection of the class struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor in very clear terms. But again, like we have said, where do we start from? First of all, we would look at it from the policy angle of it. We call on Mr. President, who we believe that he tend to have this reformative, a reformist perspective to things. Once you understand where these things are coming from, where the problem is. So the Nigerian Correctional Service as an issue of policy, we need to see them go back to, in all honesty, beyond just assumptions, beyond just giving yourself a good name. Can you go back in retrospect and ask and see what is your verification? So, because it is very true that they may tell you that there's what we call falsification of age. So it is an age that the police must have given them, because that's where the documentation takes place. When you go, you have a problem, under the first information report, they document some of these things, tell you the age of the person. It is at that point that they falsify this information. And if a child is 20 years, is 10 years, for instance, and they go to tell you that, okay, in the first information report, they say that child is 18 years or 19 years, you're going to document it as that. So the procedure for verifying, we do not have a very strong documentation process already where ages of people can be vetted. So again, on one part, that's why I say we need to look at it from a policy perspective. Do we have a place where every child is rightly documented from birth? That when they go to click on Jacob at the level of the prison, of the correctional centers, they click on my name, they see every information about me, because that is a security agency. So that whatever falsification that is being done at the level of the police division or police outpost or whatever that it is verified, independently verified by the prisons. Now, so prisons by standard will tell you that once a person is not 18 years, he cannot be detained, he or she cannot be detained. Even if there's a court order that the person should be detained. So the judge, the magistrate, works directly on the information presented by the police. So all that we just need to do is, as far as this issue is concerned, because we're not talking about prison welfare yet. We're just talking about the issue of age, whether they are children or not children. So when we go to the police, we then ask the police. Now the police may then say that there are instances that parents or guardians could lie over to falsify the age of a child in order to keep them away from the acts of the law. So the question then is, how then can the police verify? So does every child have a birth certificate certified, of course, by the National Population Commission? So it's an issue of national security, not just a decision that parents should decide that, oh, I'm not going to have I just gave birth to this child at home, so I am not going to document the child. Every child, it has now become an issue of national security that every child must be documented. And that is why, in the larger sense of our security, not just the criminal justice procedure or process in Nigeria, it is already a very complex atmosphere where we do not have data. People go to kill, people go to do all manner of things, and you cannot trace them because the documentation procedure has not been done. So we must make beyond people. So if you're a Nigerian, you must always have this not just beyond just a national identity card. So before you have a national identity card, it is also believed that you have so it is not optional for you to be documented. It's an issue of national security, and anybody who does not do it, let's take it from there. Anybody who does not do it must also face the wrath of the law. That's the parents. Now back to the issue of beyond policy. Let's look at it. There must be attitudinal change. Please, can we start an advocacy and awareness where parents must go and document their children? Because if a parent has a birth certificate from the National Population Commission, definitely and they have the services of a lawyer. They have the evidence that that child is not 18. So it means that they cannot even put that child in cell, police cell, neither can they take him or her to the prisons. So it's just for them to quote the sections of the law that says you cannot do this, you cannot do that. But where a parent does not have that, he or she can just fall victim of this oppressive, it could be deliberate or undeliberate oppressive tendencies of either the police or any other criminal administrator in Nigeria. So parents must make it as a deliberate move to have their children well documented with the National Population Commission. Then on the other hand, the police must have a verification process, so also the Nigerian Correctional Center, so that we do not have a falsified information whenever a child or somebody is being brought to the facility.
Yeah, well, you know that if this is done the way it should be done, there will be data. And you know that when there is data, politicians cannot falsify any records that will show that their constituency is so large that they need more things and all that. Politicians use this to their advantage. So who is going to drive the process to make sure that we have data in Nigeria? So it's a problem. The Population Commission is not working the way it should work. They always come up on election year and say they want to do counting or census, and then it doesn't work, and they postpone it and assume the figures. So now we have up to 230 million Nigerians without knowing whether it is truly higher or less than that. So we don't know who is going to drive this process. What do we need to do? Will we leave it in the hands of the CSOs? Will we leave it in the hands of other independent bodies, or will the government be able to drive this process, knowing that the government itself has its hands soiled rather? Okay,
that is why I maybe let me also mention this. It's so unfortunate that in a country that have lived all these years and with so much resources and have come up with a couple of development plans and all whatnot, that we're still grappling with the fact that the power of an individual can affect, even can temper very strongly with even the constitution. So it means that for us to get anything right, we must have a president who understands this issue and is committed to addressing them. So our presidents are always a product of whatever information. And funny enough, the very moment you become a president, you are already to an extent, you're supposed to be like a chief security officer of this country, the commander-in-chief, of this country, which means that information will be at the beck and call. But because of the too many things that a president would have to do, that we have not created the independence of a couple of agencies and parastatals of the same government, everything goes to the president. He or she is limited, of course, to not produce a female president. So as far as Nigeria is concerned, he would have to do whatever that he has. So conversations like this on the media, and also, like you've talked about the issue of CSOs now, I don't want to hit CSOs so hard in the sense that over the years too, with the dwindling granting, a couple of our CSO organizations are donor-dependent CSO. So before you do anything on population, before you do anything on health, before you do anything on a couple of things as a CSO, there must be this foreign support that comes in. And severally I've told people, now so that we don't debate, but let me just hint a bit. Once your development is dependent on foreign donation, your national security is already compromised. So it means that beyond just us doing this advocacy on media engagements and all whatnot, government must also be deliberate to support the work that civil society groups are doing. So for instance, if you want to go, let's say now I want to go to correctional center here in Jos, which is not too far from our office. But it's not just one person that is going there. We're also having people that will constantly, or let's say want to go to all the detention facilities, the police outposts in just the Jos metropolis. How many of those facilities do we have? and how many, at what frequency will people be going. So they need some sort of support, logistic support. So all this, the question is, where do we get them from? So but as the funding cuts continue, it affects even the veracity or the depthness of the work that CSOs are doing. So there's a very big problem, but conversations like this on the media could get to the right ear, and Mr. President, who is the all powerful as we speak at this moment, regrettably, could then begin to look at these issues from the angle of national security.
All right.
Because once the documentation is not properly done, it affects, and the reforms in the prison or the criminal justice system is not done. Because you said something that majority of even those people are on a waiting trial. So let's say I was detained when I was 13 years, and I have been on a waiting trial for like 5 years. And I became 18. So what sort of even judgment are you going to give me? Are you going to give me the judgment as at the time that the crime was committed, or as at this very moment that I am 18, that I'm 18 years? What kind of testimony do I even give? Because the law stipulates where children's case should be tried.
And will I be compensated?
There should be family court.
Will I be compensated that I was detained at 13 when I was not supposed to be detained till I was 18? Well, those are conversations we'll be having. Those are conversations we'll continue to be having, and whether the president listens or not, someone somewhere is hearing it, and one day we hope that the right thing will be done. But for, like you said, the entire system needs a revamp, and that is what we're advocating for right now. We'll be doing our bit and let the powers that be do their own when they feel time is right. But this is how much we can go. Jacob, thank you so much for being a part of our program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Have a nice day. We've been talking to Jacob Choji Pwakim, Executive Director, Youth Initiative Against Violence and Human Rights Abuse. We're just looking at the fact that the correctional centers have denied that they're having any minors in their custody. But you and I know that that may not be true. But to be fair to them, Jacob pointed out that some of these cases may not be their fault because the information that got to that table was different from what should have been. So the fundamental problem may be coming from somewhere else, and we need to address all of that. Well, this is how much we can take on the show this morning. We're hoping you will return tomorrow to join us for the Friday edition of the program. In the meantime, have a wonderful day. My name is Nyangul. Agaji.